Hi, I'm Sean Keef. I run sales enablement for Skybox Security, and here's a demonstration video covering the creation of a new access ticket in Change Manager. The new access ticket is the primary Change Manager demo. Our story starts in the Change Manager main screen, where we'll choose Create New Ticket to start the process. On the right-hand side of the screen, we can see a blank ticket in the request phase. The workflow we're using has 5 phases, but of course that's completely configurable. An organization might have more or fewer, and of course they have the ability to assign the phases to different users and groups. Typically, a user won't see all of these phases, just the phases he's associated with. Most of the users in the company will only be associated with the request phase and won't have access to the other phases. We see them all because we're logged in as an admin user. In the request phase, we're going to fill out 2 chunks of information. The request itself is one of those chunks, and the title and description describing the ticket is the other chunk. We'll start with the request itself by clicking on the Access Update button. There are many ways to make up a request. At the most basic level, we're talking about a source, destination, and a service. This would describe a common layer 3 or 4 ACL rule. Notice that in the source section, there's a place to define a user, and in the service section, there's a place to define applications. This allows us to support next-gen firewall requests as well as traditional ACL rule requests. We'll start with the source. I can type a single IP address, a range using a hyphen, a CIDR block, or a comma-separated list. We're going to emulate giving 2 branch office networks access to the common company applications. For source, I'll just type in 2 Class C CIDR blocks that represent the branch offices. For the destination, we'll use the dialog box at the top that will allow us to choose existing objects. I could choose a firewall object or a repository object. I'm going to search for objects that begin with app. I'm going to choose repository objects, and here are the 4 applications that I'm looking for. Lastly, I'll define the services. I'm going to use a large range. Now that our request is defined, we'll fill out the second chunk, the title and description, that's part of the general information section. Now we're finished filling out the ticket. We'll hit the Promote button to move it to the next phase. When I hit Promote, it moved the ticket to the Technical Details phase. This is where the network administrator chooses how to make the change. In the middle of the screen, we can see the original change request. Below it, we see the derived change requests automatically provided by Skybox. This is the result of the integration with the analysis engine. Without that integration, the administrator would have needed to consult maps or other tools to determine the firewalls in the path. Then we would have needed to query each of the firewalls to see if the access requested was already being provided by the firewall. This is a time-consuming process that Skybox performs in seconds, providing great ROI through reduction of labor. These derived change requests show the firewalls in the path and the possible changes that could be made to each firewall. If we look to the right of each change, we see a column labeled Change Required. Here, Skybox checks each proposed change against the firewall to see if the access is already being supplied by an existing rule on the firewall. In our example, we see that the proposed changes on the main and finance firewalls are unnecessary as access already exists. Clicking on the Already Allowed link will bring up a dialog box that shows the rule providing the existing access. In our case here, the request is already being supplied by a combination of two rules. In this phase, the network administrator is going to choose what changes need to be made and choose how those changes should be implemented. In the real world, he would probably remove the two derived changes that aren't needed and maybe even choose a smaller set of services, just the ones that are needed for the applications, instead of the big list that was requested. For time's sake, we'll just leave everything as it is and promote the change to the next phase, risk assessment. Risk assessment might go to another person on the firewall admin team responsible for approving requests based on how much risk they pose. Traditionally, this is done by just eyeballing the request. The ticketing integration with the analysis engine allows Skybox to show exactly what risks are associated with implementing this change from both the compliance and vulnerability exposure perspectives. In the end, this reduces the number of rollbacks that occur due to discovering, after the change is made, that the change violates policy compliance. We start by choosing a derived change. We'll choose the change that would need to take place on the prod firewall. Down below, we see two more boxes. One that displays the policy violations that will occur if this change is made, and the second that shows the vulnerabilities that will be exposed to a new portion of the network if the change was implemented. At this stage, the risk assessor has three options. He can approve the changes, acknowledging the associated risks, and advance the ticket to the implementer. When implemented, an exception will be automatically created for the policy violations as they were just approved. His second option is to kick the ticket back to the network administrator in the technical details phase and request that he make the change a different way. Maybe in this case, he would request that the service group be made smaller, or maybe a smaller object be created. Lastly, he could completely reject the ticket, kicking it back to the original requester with notes on why the change request is being rejected. For our demo, we'll go ahead and approve the changes as they are and advance them to the implementation stage. Our ticket has now gone through the first three phases: request, technical details, and risk assessment. There are additional videos covering the next two phases, implementation and verification, which is also known as reconciliation. Thank you for watching this video on creating a new access ticket with Change Manager. Please visit our website for additional videos and resources.